let's do this. Rekindled Kindness by Deathshead419 and Reinkarnitor. 3,500 words. A frigid wind blew through the Hedwick forest, chilling Vanine to the bone. She shivered, rubbing her arms as she trudged through the knee-high snow. Icy droplets fell on her from the tree branches above, for though all was frozen and the sky clear, the world conspired to rain on her all the same. She paused to cough, feeling lightheaded. A hand landed on her shoulder, her so-called friend, Warren of Preston, asking, "Are you going to be all right?" "We'll find out on this march, won't we?" Vanine retorted, pushing her hand away. "Please, if you're too cold, tell me. I could lend you one of my coats." Warren jostled the bag over her shoulder. "Leave her to her misery," Noltuna, the bastard of Bristol, said through chattering teeth. The arrogant braggart stepped into view, bundled in 4 layers of cloth and earmuffs while still shivering. "She didn't want your generous loan to buy a cloak. She clearly wants to suffer." "I didn't want to be indebted to someone I'm unsure if I still consider a friend," Vanine thought bitterly, biting her tongue and instead glaring right at Ultuna. "We wouldn't be freezing here at all if your plan hadn't fallen apart." "And how was I meant to know that the Brambler farmstead would be abandoned?" "It's just outside Bristol, and it was your idea to go to him for a slate of Freston," Vanine snapped. "I thought even a creepy moron like you would know your own hometown." "Settle down, you two. It was a mistake," Warren said, holding out her hands as though to separate them. "I don't believe that any of us were trying to make one another miserable." "Ultuna has done nothing but make my life miserable," Vanine thought, turning away and resuming her march. "Come on, let's get moving. We'll freeze if we stand still." "Finally, some sense," Ultuna muttered. The cold deepened as they marched silently along the forest road. The only signs of life in the skeletal forest were a few patches of mistletoe and the tracks of a deer. The forest grew hilly, the grade cutting through the forest slopes and bridging gullies. And then at last they arrived at a tunnel through the heart of the largest hill. A tunnel completely filled with snow. Vanine stared at the wall of snow, the last dregs of her patience draining away. "Oh no," Warren said, horrified. "I had no idea." "You dragged us 12 miles into this frozen forest to a dead end," Vanine said in a dead voice. "You dragged us 12 miles into this frozen forest to a dead end," Vanine said in a dead voice. "Yeah, you can't think I did that on purpose," Warren said, sounding hurt. "I'm your friend." "Well, that's just peachy," Noltuna muttered. "I don't suppose you know a way around." Vanine sniffed. The warm aroma of roasting meat and spices on the wind. "Do you smell that?" "Smell what?" Warren asked. "All I smell is rot," Noltuna muttered. "There's food nearby. I can smell it." "Vanine, there's nothing anywhere near here." "I can smell it." "She's gone mad," Noltuna laughed. "Or madder, since she's been crazed all along." "Then, this way," Vanine snapped, clambering up the frozen side of the road and onto the slope. There, between the trees, stood an inn, or some other way station, with bright windows, smoke curling from the chimney, and the promise of a meal. "I knew it." "That's impossible," Warren gasped. "Vanine, this must be a witch's trick or some other magic." "You've both led us to disaster," Vanine said shortly, marching through the snow towards the inviting door. "Now, you both follow me." A single candle flickered atop the old and heavy door like an ornament, and into the wood itself words were carved. "From dawn of time, I'll never fade. I am the birth of an age." "Rather dramatic," Ultuna muttered. Vanine ignored him and pushed the door open. Instantly, they were surrounded by the smell of delicious food and drink, warmth, laughter, and a crowd stranger than any of them had ever seen. There were normal humans in the tavern, but then again, there were also beings that had no human resemblance at all. Beings that looked like terrors from the night. Beings that could have come from the heavens themselves. Warren and Noltuna instinctively reached for their weapons upon seeing the patrons, but one sharp look from Vanine made them reconsider. They reluctantly let go of their sword hilts again. At the very end of the traveler's room was a bar, and Vanine decided to head there first. If anyone could give them answers about this place's weirdness, it would certainly be the one behind the counter. Upon closing in on the bar, Vanine identified the figure behind it as a young man with light brown hair and blue eyes. He wore a white shirt, black pants, and a green apron with "The Wanderer" written upon it in gold letters. That, and the fact that he was wearing glasses, led Vanine to believe that he must be quite wealthy. Not just anyone could afford imprinting a simple apron with words, and as far as she knew, only nobility had the means to get their hands on monocles and glasses. At the same time, his shoes seemed to be riddled with holes, eaten by worms. "Welcome to the Wanderer," the man greeted when she rang one of the golden bells on the counter. "My name is Claw, and I'm the innkeeper. What can I get you?" "Hey, may I ask a question?" "Sure thing." "What is this place? How can this inn be here in this frozen wasteland?" Claw smirked. "I guess you came from a pretty bad place, huh? This inn doesn't just stand in one spot." He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "I can't really explain how it works, but the Wanderer appears in many places, in many worlds, usually when you need it the most." Warren, who has been listening from behind, narrowed her eyebrows. "When needed most?" she asked skeptically. "Well, didn't we?" Vanine asked her companion in return, to which she nodded slightly. "All I can tell you is that you'll be safe here for as long as you like, and once you go back outside, you will be where you entered," Claw explained, and handed the three visitors 3 wooden plates with paper pinned on them. "Our menus. Choose whatever you want to order, and then I'll get back to you." This was all a bit much to take in for the 3. They sat down at the bar and looked over the so-called menu, but Vanine's gaze soon started to sway over all the unusual patrons. Upon the countertop sat a little white fox, which was gently humming a musical tone while sipping on some peppermint tea. A skeleton came through the door and joined a giant lizard at a table. And then she turned to her right and looked directly into the red eyes of a young man with long silver hair, sitting next to her on the counter. Taking it all in, I see. I get it. It's a weird place, isn't it?" He offered her his hand for a shake, and after a moment of perplexion, she accepted it. "The name's Ree. This one next to me is Jamori." He introduced himself and a young woman sitting next to him, who Vanine hadn't even noticed. While Ree was wearing a simple black coat and some form of hat, Jamori had an elaborate and expensive-looking outfit, mostly because of the many purple fabrics which matched the color of the 2 horns on her head. Her also silver hair, which was messy compared to Ree's, swayed as she turned towards the 3 knights, her orange eyes almost glowing as she took them in. For some reason, the 3 felt kind of uneasy under her gaze, indifferent as it may have been. "You are in much pain," Jamori suddenly said towards Vanine. "I feel fine, thank you." She tried to ease the horned girl's mind. "Pain in your heart, in your soul." Vanine was baffled. Jamori then looked at Wern and Ultuna. "One tries to change. One never will." "Dear, please don't pry on their personal matters," Ree asked the silver-haired girl, and she nodded quietly. "Sorry," she simply said, and went back to the plate in front of her, which was full of cookies. She was just about to put one into her mouth when her gaze shifted back to Vanine. She suddenly reached over Ree and placed the delicious sweet before the knight. "Here, it's tasty." Vanine blinked in surprise, the nice aroma making her stomach rumble, and leaned forward. A strong hand grabbed her shoulder. "Careful," Warren said. "It's dangerous to accept food from fairies." Ree couldn't help but wheeze at that remark. "Jamori, a fairy!" The woman beside him frowned when Ree said that. First time her facial expression changed since Vanine first saw her. "That's not funny, Ree." Sorry. Just such a dumb thing to say." "This whole affair is stupidity itself," Ultuna snapped, reaching over and smacking the cookie from Jamori's fingers. "We ought never to have entered this foul place." "Foul may be, since you stepped in," Ree murmured into his coffee mug. "What was that?" Ultuna hissed, jumping up from his stool. "I called you a terrible person," Ree calmly answered. Vanine snorted, while Wern gasped in shock. Altuna, though, turned beet red. He slid a glove from his hand, marching up to Ree and slapped him across the face with the glove. "You have insulted me, and I demand satisfaction!" "I won't satisfy someone like you. If you don't like it here, then leave," he calmly said, while rubbing his cheek. "Then you are a coward!" Altuna drew his sword with a hiss of steel on leather and put the point to Ree's chest. "And I will strike you down!" With one swift move, Ree was off his stool, black cane in hand. "Do you really think this is wise?" Ree asked the arrogant knight. "Altuna, stop at once!" Wern hissed. "You're skating on thin ice." "I won't back down from a challenge," Altuna retorted. "Apologize for your insult, or I will make you regret it." "Insult? You're acting like a naughty child." Ree turned the knob of his cane and drew a blade hidden inside. The wanderer had gone quiet by now. The white fox had stopped his music. The conversations had ended. Claw watched the scene unfold from behind the bar. Vanine glanced at the barkeep, hissing, "Do you have a bouncer or some other way of stopping this? Altuna's out for blood." "That won't be necessary," Claw said, without a care in the world. "There's no way Ree will be harmed." Vanine bit her lip, for though she was loath to give the bastard of Bristol any credit... she didn't think that his opponent had much chance. Her suspicions seemed justified, for Altuna lunged right at Ree's heart, and the young man barely parried the thrust. Altuna moved like lightning into the next attack, slashing sideways and getting under Ree's guard, sending him reeling backwards. "If you keep this up, it won't end well for you," Ree tried to reason and swung his blade at him. Altuna ignored the warning, batting away Ree's feeble attack and countering, uttering in disgust, "At least the gutter rat has poise. You are pathetic." A final attack sent Ree backwards into an empty stool, the young man stumbling over and losing his blade. Altuna put his sword to Ree's throat, his lips parting to under a demand of submission. Yet the point stopped and jittered a half-inch from Ree's skin. Altuna's sword started to glow brightly violet before shattering into 1,000 tiny pieces. Vanine could barely believe what she was witnessing. What was that? What just happened? "You dare to threaten him?" A voice rang out from behind her. When Vanine turned around, she saw Jamori, floating in the air, surrounded by energy like she had never felt before. This wasn't magic. It wasn't a trick. This was power, in its rawest form, destruction itself, as if someone took death and gave it a form. Purple light and smoke surrounded Altuna as he was picked up and held in midair. "I knew it!" Altuna shrieked. "Fairy trickery!" "I will disintegrate you. You really think you have any value left within your pathetic flesh-sack body?" Jamori's voice was full of hatred, and her hands started to emanate a bright light, when suddenly it was grappled. "Jamori, don't!" The weak voice was Ree's. He had stopped the woman just before she was able to complete whatever she had planned to do with the night. "Put him down!" Wern cried, jumping from her stool. "Wern, no, don't!" Vanine said, reaching out and grabbing her friend's hand before she could draw her own sword and follow Altuna's idiocy. "How dare you! Do you know what family I'm from?" Altuna shouted, glaring at Ree. Ree ignored him and gently brought Jamori back on the wooden floor of the inn. "You are not your power, Jamori. It doesn't control you. You control it." She looked at him, and her blazing eyes went back to normal. Altuna landed on his face with a loud thud. He groaned, pushing himself to his feet. Upon looking at his shattered sword, his lips trembled. He drew his dagger, pointing the blade at Jamori. "That sword was enchanted by the masters at Fregan, and a gift from my father, acknowledging me—" Suddenly, he was cut off. The walls of the inn itself shook. It was then when a mighty voice sounded through the entire building. "Who dares to draw their sword in me? Who set their inner Scrooge then free? Do you understand that this will mean your end?" Can it be true? Vanine thought. Be rid of the bastard of Bristol? Eyes flicked to Wern, her friend having turned ghostly white. With a sigh, she rose as well and said softly, "Please don't kill him." Many armies came to me, tried to put me on my knees, but I would never falter or fall, stood strong throughout it all. If it is death and hate you seek, within me you'll just one thing meet, a promise that I keep for eternity. Please, Wern whispered it, looking between the barkeep, Ree, and Jamori. Please, I beg of you on his behalf, don't kill him. Ree shook his head in a motion that made it clear that neither he nor anyone else, even Claw himself, could have changed what was about to come. From the dawn of time I have stood here. I swore that I'll never fade. Is it time for me to remind you that I am the birth of an age? I'm the one who cares. I'm the one who is fair. I'm the Wanderer. With that, Altuna lost the floor under his feet, was dragged towards the door at high speed. He desperately tried to hang on to anything, but it was hopeless. The invisible force catapulted him out into the snow, and the door swung shut with a loud bang, as the patrons erupted in laughter. Vanine breathed a sigh of relief, glad that Wern hadn't witnessed Altuna's death. Her friend, though, seemed less reassured. Wern turned to the barkeep, her voice hoarse. What just happened to him? The Wanderer threw him out. He's forbidden from ever entering this place again, Claw answered while cleaning a mug, as if such a thing was a common occurrence. Then he is alive, Wern asked. For the invocation, I thought... What a drama queen this place is, a voice sounded from behind her, and upon turning around she saw it was Ree, who, aided by his cane and Jamori, came over to them again. It would never kill anyone. You ought to forgive someone for assuming the worst, given the words I heard, Wern said. I'm sure they understand, Vanine said. Now come on, let's have lunch. No, we need to make sure Altuna is all right. He'll be fine. He's bundled against the cold, and if we bring him a hot meal from here, we'll be able to reach the other side of Hedwick Forest. Vanine glanced at the barkeep. It'd be all right to bring him a meal. Sure, 1 meal to go. What'll you have? Plate of fried potatoes with egg and a cup of chocolate, Vanine said. What would you have, Wern? But is it all right to eat in here while poor Altuna freezes? Wern, he's a jerk, an impetuous ass who's quick to violence and cares nothing for other people except what he can get out of them. That's not quite fair, is it? Wern asked, her eyes flicking to Jamori. The strange horned girl stared back, her eyes burning like flames. You are in pain, but not much like your friend. You are in pain of choice, a choice that should be obvious. Jamori's gaze next shifted to Vanine. Your pain has eased. Have you perhaps realized you can change? More like I saw the bastard of Bristol get his comeuppance, Vanine thought. Yet after a moment she realized that Jamori was right. Because I feared that Wern would always see Altuna as someone faultless, part of the club. Vanine nodded, a tentative smile on her lips. I always knew she could, but I feared that she would not. Ree sighed. Wern, it was Wern, right? You should realize that this guy is out there for a good reason. As I understand it, you are knights. I've studied quite a few knight orders in my time, and isn't it the main rule to be noble and selfless? But, Wern glanced at the door, he's a knight in good standing, and we've worked together before. And did you enjoy his company? Vanine asked. Really enjoy spending time with him? Wern blinked, her gaze growing distant. Jamori placed her hand on Wern's shoulder, surprisingly gentle gesture of the before-so-fierce girl. Wern, true worth stems not from the strength of one's standing, but the strength of one's heart. I guess Altuna isn't the nicest member of our order, Wern said evenly. And she glanced at the barkeep, seeming, if not relaxed, then resigned. What would you recommend for a newcomer? The cold light of the stars glared down on Altuna, leaves visible in the circle he had walked in the snow. The knight muttered to himself as he trudged around and around in front of the inn. Rage filled him as he thought of the arrogant man who had not just so cowardly insulted him, but hidden behind the power of a fairy. Stupid, stupid thing, Altuna growled, flexing the fingers of his right hand, his glove lost inside the inn. Owe me a sword, an apology, and now a glove, too. The stillness of the snowy evening was broken when the door clattered open. Altuna looked up, watching in disbelief as Wern and Vanine stepped outside, both looking cheerful and waving back into the inn as happy voices echoed from inside. Altuna stomped out of the circle he had carved, racing towards the door, which had earlier rejected him. He was barely 3 paces away when Wern let the door clatter shut. Like a sigh in the wind, the bright windows and firm walls grew translucent, and then faded away like smoke on a breeze. "Damnation!" Altuna screamed, making Wern and Vanine jump. "Those fairy freaks got away with everything!" "They returned to where they're needed," Wern said, holding out a bag. "Here, this is what you might have eaten with us if you hadn't been so rude." "They were rude!" Altuna snapped, swatting the bag away. "Now how do I get back inside?" "You don't," Vanine said shortly. "This is absurd! A scandal! Stop," Wern said, holding out her hand. "We need to get moving again. Do you want your food or not?" "Well, Altuna bit his tongue, a wave of hunger coming over him. After a moment's hesitation, he seized the bag. "Fine. Let's forget this ever happened." Vanine nodded, resuming her march with Wern at her side. Altuna felt a chill in his fingers, swallowing as he said, "Did either of you pick up my glove? My hand is cold." "You lost it, fair and square," Wern said shortly. "It was hardly fair and—" "Shut up," Vanine snapped without turning around. Altuna waited for Wern to rebuke her friend for speaking so rudely. When Wern instead put one of her coats on Vanine's shoulder, he understood that he would be waiting for the rest of his life. Throw up those moths and monsters. Cheer for the story if you loved it. Why we posted a creepy gif Reinkarnitor. Riek says, "Well read, thanks. I'm glad to hear it." And if you guys want to talk about like which parts are to be read, you can feel free to talk about that. And if you have any more questions, then don't hesitate to share them. I don't think you had questions in the when you posted the story, but let's look. Nope. No particular comments. I see, because it says it reacted with eyes on my last message. All right. Okie dokie. You're gonna ask, can you figure out which parts are mainly written by Deathshead and which by me? Well, it flowed really well, so there was nothing that felt like, like this was definitely a different author. Like it flowed into each other. I would guess that well, I'm pretty dang sure that the first part was written by Deathshead because it's all his characters. I would guess that either you wrote a lot of the middle or that you guys did kind of a role play thing back and forth where like you would write what your characters would say and then Deathshead would write what his characters would say. So not sure about your method, but those are my guesses. I see true and also true. I assume true that Deathshead wrote the beginning and true that you guys went back and forth. Thank you for the cheer, Marks. Oh, the end was written by Deathshead mostly as well. Oh yeah, the where they're back in the woods, of course. There was only one clue, and I only noticed it on this reading. And so I'm curious if it's just me seeing something in nothing, or if it actually was a clue. But like, there were quite a few retorteds, and then there was one section where it was said. And knowing this part is Deathshead, I assume that the parts that were all the retorteds were Deathshead, and the said was Rink. Correct, I teed up the story, Reinkarnitor said at the scene in the inn, and we went back and forth until I closed it up. Nice. That's cool. Yeah, if we do another partner story event, then that I feel like that's good advice to do it in that kind of role play fashion where it's just like, you know, one character writes, or one author writes this, and the other author, I keep saying character, writes the response, and you just like do a back and forth. Alrighty, Roo. Well, let's just get started. So I do have a critique for the beginning. So let me pull up the Google Doc. So the Google Doc here had this whole like intro with summaries of the characters and stuff like that. And I was thinking when I saw that, I'm like, okay, like that's fine to have that to like inform your readers and stuff like that. But I was like, please don't tell me that I'm going to need to read this to understand the story. Because the story itself should be understood just by the story itself. And when I started reading, I was kind of feeling like that was true. I was kind of feeling like I needed to read that to understand who the characters were. And it's weird because on a second read, like, everything makes sense and it flows quite well. I think it's just too many names thrown at us when we don't know who these characters are too fast. Especially with something like her so-called friend, Wern of Freston. The, like, of Freston really doesn't matter. And then the so-called friend creates, like, questions and stops you up a little bit. And so I think that, you know, maybe starting with, you know, 3 knights wandered through the forest. Vanine, say something about her personality, you know, and maybe something about her clothes. And then Wern, who was once her friend, but she wasn't sure if she was anymore. Something about her. And then Ultuna, the bastard of Bristol, bundled up in 4 coats, you know, waddling around the snow, something like that. I feel like even something like that would really help introduce the characters. I don't know if that kind of thing feels too laundry listy, if it's like, but there are so much more creative ways to introduce characters than being like, hello, 3 characters walk through the forest. But I do think something like that would help me differentiate between the 3 a bit faster. And I do think Bastard of Restil is actually a great intro, because it probably, considering the time period this is based off of, it probably literally just means that he's literally a bastard. But it also fits his personality. And so, like, hey, yo, this guy's a bastard, works really well as an intro and really, like, made him stand out even from the beginning. So I'll praise that one for sure. Throws 3 characters in the snow. You exist now! Amazing. So I am curious, what did you guys think in the chat? Were you also confused, or were you like, no, I could pretty easily keep track of who is who? I guess I'll talk about this now. I could talk about it basically at any time, but I think you have a good arc with Wern here, Wern and Vanine, that Vanine thinks that Wern is just going to keep defending Ultuna and being nice to him when he's being a jerk, and she is kind of like, hey, like, you don't have to be nice to him, or, you know, you that kind of thing. And I think that's what you were going for with the so-called friend thing. However, when I read that, other than, like, just kind of being lost and confused the first time, when I read so-called friend, I'm not thinking, like, she's a little too nice to a jerk. That's not really generally why someone is like, I don't know if you're my friend. And so I think that either taking the so-called friend stuff out and then instead focusing more on, you know, like, having Wern say this, like, hey, if you're too cold, I could lend you one of my coats. Then have, like, Vanine roll her eyes and think, like, she was always nice to him, even when he was a jerk. Like, even stating it simply like that Vanine is like, ugh, why does she keep being nice to him? Would really set up the conflict of the story super well. Another thing that you could do is you could expand more on the so-called friend thing and explain why she's thinking, like, I don't know if you're my friend or not, rather than just stating it. So I really like what you're doing with that. I feel like it just needed to be set up a little bit more to be that complete arc. And then I do like the, you know, his teeth chattering even though he's super bundled up. That's great. I like the whole thing about, I think even you would know your hometown. I am curious why they didn't turn around when the farm was a bust. But I like that. And I like Vanine setting up that she is not a fan of Ultuna. I think that worked. I do feel like having Wern like be more directly leading them, like she's in the front and being like, this way guys, I think would help, because like even here, like Vanine is the one who's marching, and so it doesn't really seem like Wern is the leader. So I think having Wern be like, come on, we'll freeze if we don't keep going, and her leading the front would help it seem more like she dragged them. Because as is, I just kind of am like, okay, I didn't really see her as dragging them, but I guess she did, you know? Really like how the Wanderer is introduced. I can feel like, oh, that sounds so nice. Even from the intro. Ad incoming. And I do like Vanine being like, hey, you led us to the farm that couldn't help us, a farm that was abandoned. You led us to a dead end. I'm leading us to the nice smell of food. I think that's great. I really like the promise of a meal. I think that's great. I think Ultuna's personality is really well done the whole time. Like, he's not like the worst of the worst. He's just kind of a jerk the whole time. I think it's well written. Oh yeah, I was wondering also, is the candle literally, like, on top of the door? Like, as in, the door will close and knock the candle off, kind of on top of the door? Why is there a candle on top of the door? Ad went away. Are you coming back, Ad?
Hi, kitty. You're cute. You're cute, cute, cute.
I don't get the reference. Like, who says, this is Bob. Say hi, Bob. Hi, Bob. There's the ad.
Well, I got a kitty behind me. We can show this kitty. He's super cute. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Yes, you will. Pretty, pretty boy.
I saw Reinkarnitor said, well, the candle kind of perched next to the door. It represents the Wanderer's soul, its spirit. That's why it can never go out. Well, that is cool. But I thought it said, yeah, why does it say atop the old heavy door if it's next to the door? That feels like the wrong description if it's just next to it. I do really like how for Claw, like I doubt he's all that wealthy. I think it's probably just that he's from modern times or has visited modern times, and so he can get an embroidered apron and glasses without much trouble. But for the time that Vanine comes from, she's like, oh yeah, like those are really hard to get. And so she thinks he's wealthy, that works super well. Now, what did you guys think? What was the image you guys got for this shoes image? What did you think was trying to be described there? Because when I first read it, I actually was very confused by it, because I was like, wait, if he's wealthy, and I didn't realize that he was from modern day at this point, I was just like, okay, if he's wealthy, and I'm taking what she's saying at first value, why in the world would he have ratty shoes? why in the world would he have chewed up, worm-eaten shoes? And I looked at the comments. The shoes are Crocs. That's cute and hilarious, and I love it. But I feel like, and I understand why you went for eaten by worms. Like, that does make sense as what you might go for somebody who has never seen them before. But I do think it's that worm-eaten thing that is actually an issue. And the thing is that Crocs, like, I feel like the holes look intentional, because they don't look chewed up. And that's definitely the image I got, is they look super ratty and chewed up. But that's not actually what the image is. That's actually not what's going on. They don't look chewed up at all. It's just that they have a bunch of holes in them. And so, let's see. Yeah, so even just saying his shoes were covered in weird holes, I think would work better to me than eaten by worms. Another thing you could do is have her ask, and have her be like, what happened to your shoes? And have him be like, that's just the style of the time, you know? Or like, it's a fashion statement, or I mean, I guess you could even have him say, I don't know if it's a problem to say a name brand in a story, but, you know, you like them? They're Crocs, or something like that. I think could work. I know you didn't really have any words, but if you took words out somewhere else, that could work well. I know that Katie made a joke on the document of the, what are those? But that feels like literally what they would be saying. What are those? Or what happened to your shoes? You know, kind of thing. Anywho. Oh yeah, I did agree with the comment on this, that having him like distracted washing glasses would make sense as to why he doesn't acknowledge them the moment that they enter. But Claw is just seems like a very optimistic, happy little guy, and I enjoy him. Especially in the Crocs add to the vibes. And then I totally understand, in general, why you picked the Wanderer for the crossover thing. I feel like if we do more partner stories, I feel like Reink is gonna have to go around and partner with everybody, and all our characters are gonna have to visit the Wanderer at some point. But it's just a perfect thing for crossovers. It works really well. The little white fox is cute. I did read the note after I finished, and I do think it's cute that the fox is the DJ, or the fox is like the jukebox. That's really cute. Oh yeah, am I pronouncing Jamori right? Is it Gemori? I think you described the characters well and introduced them well. Granted, I was more familiar with the Wanderer characters than these particular characters of Deathshead's. But I think that they were introduced pretty well, that you could understand who they are and their distinctness. And then I like Jamori being, you know, mysterious and stuff. I am curious how I was meant to read this, and if I read any of her lines right in the first place. Because I was reading as this, like, looking into your soul, kind of, one tries to change, the other never will, kind of thing. And, like, I kind of was like, here, it's tasty. But I don't know if you meant it to, like, really be like, here, it's tasty. You know, really drop out of that. I like how the knights view them as fairies. That totally makes sense as to how they think of them. Not really sure why that's so funny to Ri and why it's not funny to Jamori. But I do think their reactions work, even if I don't fully understand them. And then I do like the whole, like, foul maybe when you stepped in. What was that? I called you a terrible person. I love the fact that he's just honest to his face. I think the whole escalating of conflict works super well. So here's the thing. So one of my biggest, like, I don't know, it's not one of my biggest critiques for the piece is that both Jamori and the Wanderer react late. And something else regarding the Wanderer reacting is that the only reason that the Wanderer cites for being like, I'm kicking you out and never to come back, is that he drew a weapon. But Ri also drew a weapon. It says right here, Ri turned the knob of the cane and drew a blade hidden inside. Granted, he didn't start the fight, but if the only problem is you can't draw a weapon inside the Wanderer, then Ri also should be getting kicked out at this point. And I do like the, like, hey, Altana's out for blood, we should, like, get him out. And then Claw's like, oh no, like, the god of chaos is at his side, he is fine. He will not be harmed. It would have been nice to see Ri actually fight him, though, that would have been kind of fun. Oh yeah, so here's Jamori reacting. And, like, he has been threatened long before this point. Let's see. Like, I'll make you regret it, I think was the... let's see. You've insulted me, I demand satisfaction, was kind of the start of everything. But, I'll make you regret it is, no, I will strike you down, actually. That's the first threat. So, like, there's where the threats start. And there's where she reacts. So, I like the whole conversation. I would not recommend taking it out. But it does feel odd that it feels like Jamori was kind of dozing for a bit. And then all of a sudden woke up and was like, wait a second, my boy is being threatened. And if that's what you meant, then that's kind of cute. But I do think it would need to be described that she dozed off a little bit. Because otherwise it seems a little odd that he's been threatening her for a couple pages. And then only late does she react. Also, this is cute and sweet, but it does feel a bit like an odd reaction, because it's like, well, no, she's not being controlled by her power right now. You were insulted, and so she took action. Like, this is Jamori. This is her reacting, not her power suddenly going haywire. Yeah, so there's the who dares to draw their sword in me. Yeah, so if that's not the only problem, if it was something else that was the problem, then I feel like that being described either in the dialogue or in the narration itself would be helpful, because this is the only reason we're given for why he's getting kicked out. I do like that the Wanderer does do something. Like I said, they drew their swords way earlier than this, and so it does feel like, if that's the only reason, the Wanderer is quite late in reacting. But I do like that it reacts, that it's not any patron who is like, hey, you're being a meanie, like, let's not. It's the Wanderer themselves who is like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna stand for this inside of me. I want to be a nice, happy place, so, get out. And I like the image of, like, pulling him along the floors and stuff. And I do like that, the Wanderer does say something about his end, and so I think it works well that they're like, you're gonna kill him? We don't like him, but don't kill him. And Claw's like, no, he's fine. Like, the Wanderer's nice. And then it's nice that they still bring him a meal so that he can still have the strength for the journey to the other side of the forest. Sorry, kitty. And I do like, Wern slowly being able to admit that he kind of sucks. That's great. But this does kind of go back to what I was saying before of, like, have you perhaps realized who can change? I feared that Wern would always see someone faultless part of the club. I didn't really get the impression that Wern saw him as faultless, just that she's nice. And just that she's maybe a little nicer to him than she needs to be. And so, again, a little more setup of that, I think, would be good. And I do like kind of the juxtaposition between, aren't knights supposed to be noble and selfless? And she's like, well, he has good standing. And it's like, I forget why it said that he has good standing, but it could just be a thing of, well, I was gonna say he could just have a dad that's high ranking, but he is a bastard, so maybe not. I don't know. But just because he has good standing or he's a good fighter doesn't necessarily mean he's a nice guy. And then the strength of one's standing, not the strength of one's heart, that works very well. Yep, and I think the ending works quite well, that Wern is not, necessarily being mean to him at this point, but she's just, like, not putting up with his BS. I think that works very well, because, like, of course it would be nice to have Ultuna go through some character development, but he definitely seems like the kind of character, like Jamori says, who's not going to change. That it's just like, he just kind of sucks, and we're the ones who just can decide not to really put up with it. I think that works and feels like a very real struggle that people deal with. I really like his, where'd it go? Like, they owe me a glove, they owe me this, they owe me that, they owe me a glove now. Oh yeah, a sword, apology, now a glove too. I think that worked really well. And I like that he's still seeing them as fairies. That works very well. That, like, they saw an inn that crosses universes, but they're still putting it within the framework of their own universe and understanding. Oh yeah, I didn't actually put a comment on it, but there is one part where Jamori's in chaos mode, where it says that she was like the incarnation of death itself, which seems strange to me because, as I understand it, she's the incarnation of chaos itself. And so if you're gonna go for that image, I don't know why you didn't go for the correct image, for the correct, concept. And granted, I don't know if you were trying to keep it inside of the character's head and be like, well, the character doesn't know that she's chaos. And so the character might just be thinking she's like death itself. But definitely a question I ended up having. Yeah, and the ending works very well. Like I said, it's a little mini arc of like, oh, she's not actually gonna correct her now. I think that's great.
Hi, kitty. You coming back?
All right, let's see what Riank has been saying. We were actually surprised ourselves how the story developed Deathshead's characters in the end. It ended up being really canon because the character growth worked with the current point where the characters are in Deathshead's normal story. Oh, how awesome is that? That's really cool. Okay, so to finally freaking clear this up, Claw is based on my own friend Claw, but he only picks up a conversation with patrons when they talk to him first because he's always very busy. But I see how people can't know that, obviously, so sorry about that. It's alright. Yeah, I think just showing that he's busy somehow would be good. It is actually Gamori with a hard G. Sorry about that. Thanks, appreciate it. Gamori is very reserved, and the cookie was sort of an apology for prying into her issues. The funny thing being, Gamori not understanding how else she could apologize, so she does this awkward thing. Oh, that's really cute. Of like, sorry, cookie? Also, about the reactions, Gamori intervened because Reed lost. That's why she reacted late. Ah, I see. So yeah, Altina putting the sword to his throat. I guess in that case, that maybe a different phrasing than "you dare threaten him" might work better. I'm not sure what you could say, but to show that it's like, oh, it's just because it does make sense that she would act when Ree lost. But it makes less sense when she's like, "You dare to threaten him?" It's like, yeah, he's been doing it for pages now. The Wanderer reaction when Altina did not accept his defeat and went for the killing blow with the dagger. Because basically before that it was just a duel to the Wanderer. At the moment it turned into killing, and instead he was stopped. Killing intent, he was stopped. It's also why Ryu was so hurried to calm Gamori, or else she would have been kicked for exerting too much killing intent towards Ultima. Ah, okay. I don't know how you could do it in a poetic way, but yeah, in this case, if you had him say something like, "You dare to kill another patron," or something about like you desire to kill another patron. I don't know exactly how you'd phrase it, but making it clear it's about the killing intent rather than you drew a sword would be good. For that to be understood, one must know the character. Gamori has a huge problem controlling her power once she lets it loose. I mean, that is fair, and it does make more sense knowing now that it's because, he's like, "Hey, you're gonna get kicked out too," kind of thing. That it does make more sense. But yeah, it's just mainly about the intent. That it seems like, it didn't seem like she'd lost that control just yet, but fair enough. The Chaos Death image was mixed up because, yes, inside of Vanine's head, that was what she was thinking. You're correct. Gotcha. Maybe say, "You dare try to actually kill him," and something like that. I think you dare try to kill him would sound a little more natural.
Come here. That's cute.
Only his pride should be wounded. And it's actually spot on ghoulish, yes. Forgot we left that on the dock, the character thing. Fair enough. Alrighty, Roo. What am I interested? Did Ree seem aggressive here, like an aggressor? Oh no, he did not. Yeah, I'm assuming you're asking that because of the comments on the doc. I'm not sure if there's a good way to ask if other people agree. I mean, I guess that's what you're doing. But no, I did not understand. I did not understand that particular reader's view of the story. So basically one of the readers was very much on Ultuna's side. And if they're here, I would love to hear more about your reasoning. Cause I was not on the same page myself. Like it definitely seemed to me like Ultuna was out here just being a bastard. just out here being like slapping cookies out of people's hands and, just, like I said, he's not the worst of the worst, just being a little bit of a jerkwad the whole time. And so Ree just seemed like he was dealing with a jerkwad. Thank you, Mako. Really appreciate it. Yes, she's that. Very fair. Any other questions before we wrap up?
Kitty, come back.
Still short, but we're so close. How close are we? Thanks for the good feedback, everyone. Hank says, I'm glad I can offer it. This is a lovely story. I'm glad I got to read it, especially after hearing, well, I don't know if Deathshead was sometimes referring to his own singular story, which I haven't read yet. But you brought this up in a couple of streams, so I'm happy that I got to read it on stream.